Radio Split Ranch.
Hello and welcome once again to Radio Split Ranch, a monthly visit with the Capital Region's great broadcasters of the past and sometimes present. I'm Warren Garling when I'm not on the radio. Do me a favor this month. Thank the kind gentleman who created and performs our theme music you're listening to right here, Drew Jacobs. It's so easy to do. Just visit his website at drewjacobs.com. You'll find his latest concert schedule and CD releases there, and you'll get a hint as to why he's such a good guy and wrote our theme on a wing and a prayer. Our time travel this month takes us back to the heyday of regional top 40 radio, which, if you remember, was more than just your favorite music played by your favorite DJs. At least once an hour, many times twice an hour, award-winning news departments would keep you updated on the latest events happening in your neighborhood, your region, and of course the world. While I was studying broadcast journalism in college, we were taught that newspapers were yesterday's news, television was the day's news, but radio was this hour's news. And leading the way were news professionals like my guest this month. Here's my conversation with veteran newsman Don Fields. Enjoy. Well, Don, I think the hardest thing you're going to be doing here in the next few minutes as we talk is having to look at me.
I can manage that.
Because everybody I talk to has no problem talking, and I imagine you're going to be in the same boat because you made a living at it for so long.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, a lot to remember.
We do, and we crossed paths a few times, which I've always been very grateful for because you've been gracious every time we have worked together. But in any event, let's start before that. Let's talk about how did little Donnie Fields decide, and I know that's an air name, how did he decide he was going to be a radio broadcast journalist?
Well, news was always big in our house. My dad always read the paper. Remember that, reading the paper?
Yeah.
What a quaint custom. And
it was printed on actual paper.
No,
at the time, yeah.
No,
yeah.
Don't spread such rumors. Yeah. But at any rate, I got interested in newspaper at first, in print. I became the sports editor of my high school newspaper, Albany High, the Patroon.
Albany High. So are you a local guy?
Class of 67, Albany High. That dates me, but so what? You know?
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. And then I got more attracted to broadcasting. It seemed like radio news was in its heyday at the moment, and I applied for a few positions. I eventually started doing news at one of my college radio stations.
Oh, okay.
I remember the first newscast I did was a night after the 1969 it was during the day. The 1969 World Series where the Mets beat the Orioles.
Amazing Mets.
Yep, exactly. And I reported on the game and other news that evening on the college radio station.
So it sounds to me, Don, like we started almost at the same exact time because I started in June of 69 in radio. So it was the year of the Amazing Mets. It was Moon Landing. It was Woodstock.
It was a great time
to
get involved. A lot was going on.
Yeah.
And also, I got my first job in commercial radio in the summer of 69. No, we're not going to do Bryan Adams here. And at WHRL,
sure,
103.1, which is now WGY's FM signal.
Right.
And I worked with Joe Condon. Joe taught me radio.
Wow.
And I'm sure I'm not alone in that, having that distinction.
Exactly.
Joe's a great guy.
Yeah.
I think I was a difficult student at first, but he brought me along. And so I worked there through the summer before I went back to college. And then the following summer, I think I worked there as well.
Okay. Now, and this is at which station again?
WHRL.
HRL. Okay.
It was easy listening, beautiful music.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that format?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I applied there, and actually the only reason I didn't start working there after college was that Kent Jones up in Saratoga was going to pay me 15 cents more an hour.
Ooh.
Oh, so I said, hey, gotta go to Saratoga,
Exactly.
So, Bob, it was a Bob Hill?
Bob Hill, yes.
Yes, yep. No, he did offer me a job, and then later that day I went for another interview in Saratoga and wound up taking that instead. So we would have crossed paths again. You may have actually been, well, this was 1972, so I don't know where you were by that time. We'll talk more about it as we get there.
Sure.
So, okay, so your first paid gig is HRL, Joe Condon. Now, you say Joe taught you radio. Was he doing news at the time? Or
No, there was no news
okay.
on that kind of format.
Okay.
Or just, this is, good afternoon, here's the
okay,
weather.
so you were jockeying. You were doing some disc jockey
That was
work.
my first commercial radio job.
Okay.
Later on, and after I graduated Syracuse, I commuted to Rome, New York to work at WRNY, where I did a combo shift. I did news,
Okay.
on the hour, but I also, worked as a jock as well.
Sure. Oh, that happened to a lot of us starting out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. WRNY.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are your memories of the day? Were you all around the same age? Did it become a family sort of thing, or were you working with some of these guys that had been there forever? What was it like when you first started out there?
Well, HRL, a lot of the people were maybe a little older.
Okay.
They weren't grizzled veterans.
Okay.
That's probably not.
I don't know. I don't
use.
think Joe's still become a grizzled veteran.
No. He's
Even in
terrific.
retirement. Yeah.
He's terrific. I remember listening to him at TRY
Me too.
Sunday night.
Yeah.
He was a student at McCluskey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Now that I don't remember that far, but I do remember him on TRY.
Yes.
And saying, "I want to do what he does." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there were other people on TRY. I used to listen to TRY back in middle school.
Sure.
It was junior high back then, they called it. In high school. Rick Snyder, Don Weeks.
Oh, sure.
Lee Gray.
Yeah.
Those people made an impression on me. I figured that's an industry I want to be involved in, even though they were, announcers as opposed to journalists.
Yeah. Joe Condon has kept in touch with Rick Snyder over all these years.
He has.
And so I have Rick's contact information, but so far all my interviews have been one-on-one right here in the Radio Split Ranch.
Yes.
When I finally graduate to doing some of these on the phone, I'm going to get Rick on the phone, and he'll be one of the grizzled veterans that I'll talk to, I'm sure.
Yes. Grizzled veterans, I say that not to be critical. I hope all those veterans take that in that spirit.
Exactly.
So my first full-time news job was at WCSS in Amsterdam,
Okay.
1490 AM.
Sure.
The late Phil Spencer hired me. My spouse at the time, she graduated at Syracuse, and then we were looking to move back into this area.
Cool.
And I got the job in Amsterdam and stayed there a couple of years and really learned a lot.
Okay, so by this time we're talking early 70s?
This was May 22nd of 1972.
Okay, all right,
when
cool.
I started until February of 74.
All right.
And that was it was a tough gig in terms of the work.
Sure.
You did the morning shift from 5:30 until noon. Then you had to come back in the afternoon and do afternoon drive.
Wow.
And you also covered twice a month the school board meetings.
Sure.
And you anchored a live broadcast of the city council.
There you go. You got to get that public affairs stuff in there. You had to have the hours.
Exactly. And did I mention we also did color on high school football games during the season?
Well, this is crazy because I'm in Saratoga doing the same exact thing you're talking about.
Really?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm jockeying from 6 till 9. I take an hour break for breakfast, and unfortunately, McDonald's would stop making breakfast at 9 o'clock. So I'd get there and say, "You got any Egg McMuffins left?" And half the time they'd say, "No, we're cooking the hamburgers already." And then I would go back at 10 o'clock and do news for the midday. And then after a while it flip-flopped, and I would do news in the morning and did the midday jock shift, So we're doing the same thing. And along with Herb Sabin, I covered the Saratoga High football games in the fall. We did them live from a truck. On the nice days, we'd sit on top of the truck. There was a nice deck up there. But on most days in the fall and in the winter, we're sitting inside.
Well, if we said this may be... I think most people who are listening to this podcast would relate to what we used to call a Marty.
Yes. Yep.
a remote transmitter, basically. And we used that to get a signal out of Amsterdam High School and the former Bishop Scully High School.
Right.
A couple of times we had to tie into a car battery.
Oh, geez.
Yes, Fonda Fultonville and Kennechaharry.
Well, you remember the exact time.
I remember. Okay, here's a story.
Okay.
I had set up the apparatus, the car battery with a little help at Fonda Fultonville, and Rick Williams was doing the play-by-play, and I was doing the color.
Okay.
And I see these young boys, young people, were messing around. We were on a platform like about 20 feet up,
Okay.
so we could see the game, and then I was looking down, and there were these kids who were messing around by the car.
Oh, no.
So I yelled at them, "Get away from there, you little,"
Right.
And Rick was doing the game. I was off mic, but all of a sudden Rick looks at me, like a little look of horror, like I I committed a heinous crime. And then I got back to the studio, and the announcer, Dean Edwards, who was boarding the game, looks at me with this little smile, said, "Got away from there, you little bastards."
Oh, jeez.
And-
It got picked up. Oh, man.
And then I hear the tape.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. It sounded like some jerk in the back.
Okay, all
saying
right.
it.
So
Didn't sound
yeah,
like me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's good. And we've all been there. I said the word hell on WSNY on a Sunday morning once because the button I was pushing wasn't working, and I forgot the mic was on. I said, "What the hell?" And I thought my career was over at 16 years of age. I thought, "Oh, this is it. I'm done." And nobody was cared or was listening. The boss was still sleeping, so it never came back to me.
of course, back then, saying something is innocent, that seems innocent now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Things have just changed dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. Over the years, sure.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like you had some fun in Amsterdam. You're there a couple of years, you say?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Okay.
Almost 2 years. And,
Now, what I'm surprised at, Don, is that I was always looking, when I was doing news at WKAJ, I was looking for stringers that I could call at other stations that would help me. And I'm very surprised I never called you in Amsterdam and said, "Hey, can you read this story for me?" or whatever.
well, actually, TRY beat you to it.
Ah,
because
that might be
Lou
why.
Tinney,
Yeah.
I got on his list, and I did some stories for him.
There you go. Yep,
And
that's
matter
it.
of fact, when I got to TRY in February of '74, I replaced Lou. Lou went to Channel 13.
Yes.
And was there a few years, I believe. So I started, that's how I got my in at TRY. I had lost an opportunity a couple of months before. There was an opening. Lou came to Amsterdam to interview me, but it went to some gentleman named Ed O'Brien.
Oh, my goodness. How about that?
And then I had the privilege of working with Ed when I got to TRY.
Yeah,
And
me too.
as long as we're talking about Ed, I miss him.
Oh, yeah.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
And he was so astute. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was ahead of his time. He had just amazing instincts.
Yep.
And I learned a lot from him.
Cool.
And we didn't work together that long at TRY, but I had to sign his working papers for him to work there. He was only 17 at the time.
Jeez.
And but he was terrific. And
And also the one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet, and one of the funniest guys you probably ever would talk to.
Yes,
The man had a
yes.
great sense of humor, and I really did enjoy. I worked with him very little, but in the time that I did at my first stint at TRY, it was Ed that stood out above the rest.
well, I worked with him at Channel 10 later on, but we're getting out of chronology.
Yeah,
here, so,
that's fine. Yeah, let's not do that because we'll lose our way for sure
Yes,
if we
yes.
go out of chronological order here.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you get to TRY eventually.
Yeah, I got
obviously.
to TRY in February of '74.
Okay.
92 4th Street on the second floor of the Proctor's building,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like I had arrived at my. How can I put this? I'm at a loss for words for once. So it was my goal.
Well, there you go. Yeah, since you were a kid
at the
listening.
time,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
And I worked with some of the people I used to listen to.
Yeah.
And I got to work with, I inherited Bob Slade.
Okay.
and he was great. I didn't know him before, but we got to be good friends.
Cool.
And he was there for a few years until he went to New York. And I think we've lost him since. I learned that at one of our lunches.
Yeah.
But he was terrific to work with, and TRY, we won several awards.
Sure.
I had a great team. If I may take
Absolutely.
a moment and mention
Please
a few
mention some
people
of these
here.
names. Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance if I've missed a few people. But Joe Bartlett, he came from WKAJ, which is where you worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was terrific, and he went on to WRN New York after a few years.
Nice, yeah.
And he was like a diamond in the rough, and he was just great.
Yeah,
he was just great. Brian Swin, the late Brian Swin.
Oh, remember that name? Yes.
Yeah, he worked in Amsterdam. I knew him from Amsterdam. I hired him part-time, then eventually he came full-time. He was a real pro, and I miss him too. He's no longer with us. And
a lot
Chris,
of that going around, unfortunately.
Chris Smith as well.
Yeah.
You remember Chris?
Yeah.
Chris and I won a few, awards, Associated Press awards. I wish I had those tapes that you could play, but I don't have them anymore. Reporting on 3 Mile Island, as well as a few other, a variety of local stories. Yeah. We were very competitive. Well, let me finish the thought about Chris.
Yeah.
She was working at WENT in Gloversville.
Okay.
Doing part-time news, and I think she was intimidated by just meeting someone like myself at the time, because I was like the big town.
Yeah, sure.
And she arrived, and she was a whirlwind. She was a brilliant writer, boundless energy, and did a great job for us, and went the extra mile all the time.
Probably one of the first female voices I remember on TRY. Now that I think about it, and you may know better than me, but one of the first female news voices I remember from TRY.
I think we had Stormy Becker.
Well, I know I know we did it at GNA for a while. Stormy worked for us. Yeah,
yes.
So and that's what I want to get to, because I want to publicly thank you for pretty much saving my butt and my career many times over during the mid 1970s. When I first arrived at WHAZ, which then we signed on WGNA in 1973, late 73, coming up on 50 years since they signed that station on.
Yeah.
I was a newsman. I still did some jock work, but I was mostly, I was now in the news department. Gary Putnam was our first news director. He only lasted a few months, and then I wound up stepping into that position. You and I worked out, since we were I was at the corner of State and First Street in Troy, and you were over on 4th.
Yes.
We worked out where we would share stories. Now, it wasn't where we were not doing our jobs. It was that we were able to cover more, because we would, hitch a ride together over to Albany, and you'd go to one press conference, I'd go to another, and we would just swap tapes at the end.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there was a reason that we came together to work together and do this. We were competing with WGY, who was commonly owned by General Electric Broadcasting.
Sure.
So they shared the daybook that Channel 6 had. WROW knew a lot more events that were going on, because they looked at the daybook from Channel 10. I think it was owned by both jointly owned by Capital Cities at the time, Capital Cities Broadcasting. So our respective staffs, would cover a lot of what we had in our daybook, but then we'd hear stories, some important from audio from important events that we never knew about. So we decided to pool our resources together so we can expand our reach. And I would cover one thing, and then I'd send you about 3 sound bites. You'd do the same for me. And it worked together. And the team you had, Mark, Mark Lawrence Kaplan, and Jack Madden.
Oh, yeah. Terrific
you've
team.
had a great team there.
Yeah, we did. When we first signed on in the fall of December of '73, we made a pact, just a bunch of us, and the boss, I don't even want to mention it to the boss, but we made a pact that in order to establish ourselves as a news source as well as a country music, power, we needed to not take any days off the first year. We needed to be 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and just not take any time off. Now, obviously, a little happened along the way. Mark thanked me a few years ago because I wound up getting mononucleosis and was actually bedridden for like 2 or 3 weeks. And Mark stepped in and basically ran the department while I was under. And so, but other than that, other than sick days, we pretty much made sure that we just established ourselves in 1974 as being a news station you could rely on, in addition to being, an entertainment station.
And that meant where I didn't do the 18 hours a day. Not that was amazing. That shows your dedication. But I mean, I would work. I'd hear about a story on Saturday night, and I'd go in, record something that we had like a tape newscast, and then we'd add something on, a little report by me that lasted a minute. On Sunday afternoon, there was a major story about the governor holding a news conference. I think that's the CSCA came to a contract settlement. We covered that, and instances like that. You rose to the occasion.
Exactly. And I actually showed up occasionally to work smelling like I had been at a fire, and that's because I had been at a fire. Talking to the fire chief who's putting out the fire. So they're just great memories. And for the uninitiated, for the young person listening, wondering, why were you doing all this? I can't find news on the radio hardly anywhere anymore. It was the rule at the time. It was rules and regs
mandated by the FCC.
Yeah.
You had to devote some of you had to show that you were dedicated to covering events in your coverage area.
Community, yep.
A certain percentage of your broadcast day, I believe, had to be devoted to news, or I think they labeled it public affairs.
Sure.
And that's why we have these weekly public affairs programs.
Oh, gosh. Did you enjoy doing those?
It depended on the week and
the guest.
What my subject matter was, what my subject and who the guest was.
Let me get a little closer here. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Coming up in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, I'm Don Fields, and welcome to Community Issues. The outbreak of war in the Persian Gulf is not only producing anxiety, high drama on television, among other things, it may also change a political order in that part of the world. Our guest this morning is Dr. Stephen Burke, a professor of history and chairman of the history department at Union College. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
First of all, were you surprised that President Bush decided to go to war right after the January 15th deadline, that he did not give Saddam Hussein a little more time to make perhaps a peace gesture?
I was not surprised that Bush went to war when he did. What I was surprised at, and I confess I was among those that was wrong, I was surprised that Saddam Hussein did not negotiate himself out of the situation. I thought he would do it before January 15th, and I thought that he would do it immediately after January 15th. I was in good company, but I was wrong.
Do you think, looking at the events up till this point, and let me say now that though this program is airing on Sunday morning, we are taping this on a Wednesday, and some of what we refer to might change between the time we're taping this and now. So I hope our listeners will keep that in mind. In retrospect, Dr. Burke, do you think Saddam Hussein really wanted a war all along?
That we do not know. I think that this was a miscalculation on his part. I think when the story is written years from now, there will be a great deal of American culpability in all of this.
There are some shows I loved, others that were just more of an obligation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember at WHAZ, even before GNA signed on, we did an hour-long public affairs show, usually with the same guest for an hour. Now, do you know how long you can talk about certain things with someone for I just remember starting to ask the person toward the end of the hour, so are you married? Do you have kids? I mean, you'd run out of things to talk about.
Definitely.
But you had to fill that hour, and that's what we did.
Well, I had a half hour at K-Light, and that's out of chronology here, but I remember the one guest, she gave me one-word answers. And I never thought that half hour would end.
Okay, try to top this one. I interviewed the owner of Morris the Cat.
Ooh.
Yes, the Nine Lives spokes cat,
Yes,
if you
yes.
will. And once again, after about 15 minutes, I was repeating my questions, and he was pretty much repeating his answers. It was god awful, absolutely. But again, we were obligated to do this, and every year there was a review in your files as did you meet the criteria? Did you do enough? Did you represent the community? This was all important stuff back in the day.
It was. And I miss that news on the hour. Recently, WROW used to have CBS News on the hour, and now they only have news on the hour. Well, maybe during morning drive.
It's the morning drive, yeah.
I miss that. I understand why they did it.
Yeah.
It was to get to boost their
Sure.
ratings.
Sure.
But that is something I do miss. And when you're in the car, I mean, look, there's a number of sources you can get news from.
Sure.
I'm not ignoring that, but hearing news on the hour was always a tradition.
Exactly.
And you're driving, now sometimes you're lucky to get news on the hour.
Oh, yeah.
WGY doesn't have it every hour, I don't think, but I think that might be the last holdout. WAMC, of course.
Yes. No, you're right. Absolutely. And it's a sign of the times, unfortunately. Of course, again, for the uninitiated, the laws changed, and they did away with some of these requirements many, many years ago for broadcasters, for radio broadcasters in particular. So once you didn't have to spend money on a news department, the news department started disappearing, or joining, and many stations would join together and help present the news, but nobody was in town actually gathering it or going to the news conferences.
Those were the days when one owner would have an AM and an FM station in the market, but they wouldn't have 6 or 7 stations like the rules permit now.
Exactly. So some great times at TRY. Who were some of the jocks that you were working with at the time?
Well, the preeminent among them was Rick Mitchell.
Oh, sure.
And eventually, they wanted us to, we got started and got to know each other a little bit. And then the powers that be wanted us to do like headlines at like 7:15 and 8:15. And this started something because it'd be talk between us. On the top of the hour, I wouldn't talk because it was just a straight newscast, But we would start conversing, and we'd do a routine, a back and forth, talk. And it got to be a thing. People looked forward to it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like what I did with Joe Gallagher years later at WGY. Here we go, chronology problems. But that comes much later. But people loved it, and it really took off. And the numbers that Rick and I had, he told me once he had a 13.4. We had a 13.4 in the morning.
Wow.
Rating. I think that might have been 12 plus. But, nobody is ever going to get a 13.4 in the morning now with so many different stations.
Yeah. It was sort of the forerunner to what morning shows became. All of a sudden, there was a team in the morning. It wasn't just the one jock.
Yes.
And my favorite times doing morning drive on WGNA when I left the news and went to jockeying full time was the interaction between the newsroom and the jock in the studio. We had some some fun. We had, you can say what you want about how serious these news people sound, but they're human just like the rest of us, and many of them had better senses of humor than the jocks on the air. So they added to that little talkback that would happen. That they added to the whole sound of the station.
Yeah, and it changed the identity of the whole station.
Absolutely.
And the pace of the morning show. And we became a team, basically.
Exactly.
We weren't just two disparate voices talking from separate studios. So other people at TRY, of course, John Knott, who I still know and friendly with. He was a great mentor. And we worked later at K-Lite. Here we go, chronology issues. And Tom Rivers.
Oh, sure. I remember Tom Rivers. Yeah.
Ed Riley.
Oh, yeah.
Ed Riley might have just, I think he was just leaving at the time.
I was going to say that was toward the end of his time there, probably. Yeah.
But I got to know him a little bit.
Yeah, no.
And Bob Stevens.
That name I don't remember.
Yeah.
But,
Hoffman. What's his? I can't remember his name. He was on at night.
Not coming to me either.
Okay. Okay.
But I was still a listener. I mean, it's no secret that
Bill Hoffman.
There you go. No secret that I was not a huge country music fan, even though I worked in country music for like 12 years.
Yes.
And so I was listening to the competition all the time, not just the news department to see what they were doing when I was doing news, but the music that you guys were playing was my favorite, and so I'd be listening constantly. So I kept up with all that was going on, even though I was responsible for something on a different
Well, they had a
part of
great
the
team
dial.
over there.
And
Dan Martin, of course, he was a program director,
Sure.
and he did middays as well.
Yep.
And then we mentioned him off mic, Mr. Bowers, Don Bowers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
He worked in that era too.
Yeah. Trying to get Don in here for an interview. I actually did one with him a few weeks ago, and the computer messed up. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And so we're trying to get him back in here because he's got some air checks from his travels across the country that, I just can't wait to share with folks. So
That's great.
Okay, so how long were you there at TRY with this stellar group?
I was there 6.5 years.
Wow.
Left in September of 1980.
Okay.
Let's see, I had a couple of part-timers, too, that worked for me as well. I want to mention their names. Pat Turner, who was the daughter of Lutini.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, Pat Turner. Debbie Thorne, she had worked in Johnstown. She was an excellent weekend person. So I had a great crew. And I apologize to the people I didn't mention because there's too many of you.
Yes, and they did come and go. I mean, sometimes you'd hire somebody, be thrilled to have them, and they were so good they wound up elsewhere very quickly.
Well, Dan Thomas, who is still, I think he's still in the area living in Amsterdam. He worked for me for a while too.
Okay,
yes.
There you go.
Okay, so after TRY, I got an offer to go to WQBK. They were trying to build up their news department. They were losing Carol Pozefsky.
Okay.
I remember Carol.
I remember
Pozefsky,
that name.
Yes. She worked at several stations. Later worked for CBS Radio. Did News on the Hour.
Cool.
And I think that's where she was going actually. And so Larry Barnett met me.
Okay.
We met at a diner in Albany, the Gateway Diner.
Okay.
It was one-on-one. He wanted to make sure that nobody knew we were meeting. And then in the next booth is an ad agency boss. Hey, I know your name is familiar. I know you. And Larry is just putting his his face in his hands. Like, oh my
exactly.
God.
Well, if he didn't know the name, Don, your voice is so distinctive. I mean, obviously, when you open your mouth and start talking to somebody in those days, they must have said to you, "Oh, you're on the radio," or you're a newsman.
I did get that sometime.
Yeah.
And I remember I was taking it. We were on our way to Maine with a then girlfriend. We stopped at McDonald's in Bennington.
Okay,
on our way.
Yeah.
And this young man says, out of the blue, "Hi, Don."
You
Do I know
him?
you?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I
right,
know
right.
you from the radio. It's
Wow.
a second nature.
Sure.
This happens all the time.
Yeah.
It didn't happen all the time.
No,
but it
me neither.
happened enough.
Well, again, that distinctive voice and that authoritative quality that you added to your newscasts, absolutely, yeah. So QBK, I mean, they were, as you say, turning a corner, trying to establish themselves a little deeper in the news department. So
And so the lineup there Bill Edwardson in the morning,
Yep.
Steve Fitz in the afternoon, Stevie Swire midday.
Wow.
And later on, they would add Tom Likas at night when they got permission to be more than a daytime station.
Yeah.
And they were on the grow. And then, of course, on the FM, I did news for the FM too. Got Q104.
Sure.
Ellen in the morning.
Yep.
She was great to work with. John Cooper.
John Cooper, I was going to mention, had to be there. Sure.
Yeah. Lynn Bramer.
No, I don't know if I
Lynn
remember that
Bramer
one. Yeah.
went to Chicago. I think he just recently, we lost him just recently.
Okay.
And Dory Stein, a few other people.
Nice.
They were a great group of people, a different type of talent that I work with at TRY. And I mean that in a complimentary sense.
Oh, sure.
And we put WQBK News, helped to put them on the map.
There you go.
I had Pam Carter. I don't know if you remember Pam. I met her there and later worked at Channel 10.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Pam introduced me to my wife.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, she wasn't my wife at the time.
At the time,
yeah. But we got to be there. And
Cool.
So QBK was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of, I think one of the guests who happened in was a guy named Rupert Murdoch.
I'll be darned.
And before, obviously, he became as famous as he is now.
Sure.
But I did interview him.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Pretty neat. Well, you've interviewed a few folks along the way.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
A
That's
few
a great
governors. And okay, good. Hey, I'm a radio guy. What can I tell you? Go ahead.
There was this instance I remember. I think it was February of '76. It might have been February 2nd of '76, but no way to check that. There was a presidential candidate coming through town. He was had a media avail at the Albany airport, and the only people who showed up were Bob Lawson and I.
Okay.
And
Bob being with Channel 10 at the
WPTR,
time? Or PTR.
He was
Okay.
still at
Okay.
PTR. He was the news director. He was my contemporary. And
Sure.
we interviewed Jimmy Carter. And nobody... He was such an outsider at that point.
Yeah.
Nobody ever thought he had a shot at the White House.
Yeah.
But we did like a 10-minute stand-up interview with him.
Cool.
And he couldn't have been nicer or more receptive. And we met there was an assistant named Jody Powell, who later
be
became
darned.
his
Yeah.
news secretary.
Yeah.
Or, public affairs secretary. And so that was terrific.
Wow.
To meet somebody
There's
like
a
him.
memory. Yeah, especially now that he's in hospice care at the moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Whoa, we've lived too long, Some of these people, I think back, I interviewed George McGovern when he came through Saratoga Springs back in '72. I mean, just craziness, the elbows you rub, especially in the news department. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also attended events. President Clinton, UAlbany in '94, but it wasn't a one-on-one interview.
Sure.
Walter Mondale, Dan Quayle, Bob Dole.
There you go.
Okay, so I was there to witness their campaigning and coming through the area, and those are experiences I will never forget.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I interviewed O.J. Simpson back when he was a hero.
Wow.
He's a sports hero. Yeah. Anyway, times change along the way. So you're at QBK and doing a good job for them, I trust. And were you still doing the morning? Were you
I was
anchoring
doing
the mornings?
Yes, I was doing mornings. Yes,
Figures.
and I wanted to get into television because, hearkening back to what we said a few moments ago about the day books,
Yeah.
that ROW and GY would have, that they would look into, because a lot of news sources would call television
Sure.
to alert them about an event.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bother calling radio because they didn't want to bother calling half a dozen or more
Sure.
radio stations, and half of which might not come.
Yep.
So I wanted to be in television because that was really, I thought, where they were more serious about news. Even though radio news was still strong, but you saw signs of it eroding a bit even then. So I applied to Channel 10, and I got into Channel 10. I was a producer.
Okay.
And I was there from 82 until 88.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, were you there when Capital Cities stock? You probably wouldn't be sitting here if you'd made any money on that.
I was not. Capital Cities had sold it, I think, to Pool Broadcasting by then. Yes.
All right. But quite a few local guys became quite rich when because Capital City stock was worth quite a bit when they sold.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Dick Wood, I think, would remind us of that.
Oh,
He
yes,
was always
yes. Oh, the late
They
Dick
lost
Wood.
about a lot of Capital City stories. Dick Wood was great to work with. Marcy Elliott.
sure.
And then I got a number of former broadcast reporters worked at Channel 10. I felt at home with them. I'm
Okay.
still friends with Doug Myers to this day.
There you go.
And of course, Ralph Iannotti, Bob Lawson, Denise Duncan Lacey. It was a great group. And again, there's probably a few people I'm leaving out, and I apologize for that. But and Ed O'Brien
Sure.
and Rip Rowan.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rip was the epitome of sports coverage in this area.
And
Absolutely.
Rip worked at TRY back in the 60s.
Now-
he was in doing news.
That part I don't remember. Wow.
Yep,
wow.
he was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Now, Ralph Iannotti, I finally got a chance to meet a couple of years back, and he is back in the area, if not full-time, most of the time, evidently.
He has
He's-
family in Amsterdam. and
Exactly,
that's where he
exactly.
was born and raised.
Yeah, and
So-
he spent most of his TV career after he left here in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
And had a stellar career there. So,
He did.
so I'm still trying to get him to sit where you're sitting, and we'll get him in here.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yeah,
Good
as
luck
soon,
with
as soon
that.
as the weather improves a little bit more, spring gets here, we'll get him to sit there and talk with us.
Terrific.
So you worked with some real stars of the area that were just terrific professionals.
It was a privilege. We had a reunion of the Channel 10 folks in 2019. Dick was still with us. Chris Smith was still with us. And they asked us about John McLaughlin. How can I forget
Oh,
Johnny
oh,
Mac?
sure.
I'm sorry, John.
Yeah.
But they asked us to talk about our experiences, and what I shared, and Nick Lawler, who's worked in radio earlier, I don't know if you know Nick, he became a broadcast executive, a consultant with Maggot, I believe. We both agreed, I spoke first and said, it was the thrill of working at Channel 10 was to be among these veterans of local news and follow their lead and just be in their company. It was a privilege.
Yeah.
I had worked with great people prior to that in radio, but then to get into television and even though it's behind the scenes, to work with these people, there was a lot more I learned, and it was a privilege.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Channel 10, that lasted for quite a few years, you said?
6 years.
6 years. That's good.
82 to 88, yes.
Excellent. And once again, plenty of big news during that time. You had, national news. Of course, we had the space shuttle, losing the space shuttle and the astronauts in 86. And locally, we went, we lived through, locally, we lived through the Rockefeller era, the Corning era, and a lot of those were coming to an end in the late 70s and
Well, I remember
80s.
you're talking about, I remember that election night of 84, somebody from Ed Koch's gubernatorial campaign came into the newsroom. They assumed they were going to win. Actually, it was a primary election. I'm sorry, it was a primary election.
Okay.
And in 84, and they assumed they had it in the bag. And so this a member of their campaign staff came in to see, how to help monitor results.
Okay.
And see how we performed. But I think it was more to monitor results from upstate, from the capital region, and I don't remember her leaving because obviously Mario Cuomo staged a massive political upset and beat Ed Koch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happened. I don't know if you've saw this or not. I'm not sure how much you're on the internet, on Facebook in particular, but Brian Jackson just put on Facebook that if you go to WNYT's website, WNYT.com, they have recently posted about 17-minute piece that he did on how radio or TV news was put together in 1979. You followed a typical day, and Benita Zahn is in there as the editor. She's behind the scenes. She's the story, the assignment editor is what she is.
Yes.
And so you see the whole thing. You see the great old equipment that people used to have to carry around, and the big old, clunky, video tape units and and all that stuff. But it really opened your eyes into what a process it is, starting at about 6 or 7 in the morning until airtime at 6 o'clock at night, and what
Yes.
goes into that 10 to 12 hour day.
Matter of fact, I know that one of the webmasters at Channel 13, he got the idea to dip into the News Vault, and that's why they're promoting that now.
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea, and the piece Brian did is tremendous. So take a look at it; it'll take you back
I'm sure it will.
to your great old days at 10. Absolutely. So, what goes on after Channel 10? What's the career
After Channel
path?
10, then I was still looking to stay in broadcasting. I went to Providence, Rhode Island, and I worked for WLNE, Channel 6 in Providence,
Okay.
Providence, New Bedford, and I produced a 1-hour morning show, which was somewhat a pioneer at that point. Now
Because
everybody, of course, does morning shows, 6 to 7 a.m.
Okay, and we're talking what, 1988?
1988.
Okay, all right.
To early 89.
Okay.
Early 89. And, but I was working all night. I didn't enjoy that. We had a new, an infant in the house. I didn't get to see my wife and my daughter very much. So it was difficult, although I enjoyed the work. And so then I got an offer from John Knott. There was an opening at the former K-Lite.
Sure.
Their news director, Bruce Carpenter, was leaving.
Okay.
And he flew me back. We did an interview, and a couple of weeks later, I was back in the Capital Region.
Good for
And
you.
I worked at K-Lite as news director for until 96, from 88 until 96.
Wow.
And we had some good people there.
Sure.
Peter MacArthur.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
remember
worked with
him?
him at TRY for a while.
He
Yeah.
went to GY, I think,
And
and then
GY,
went
yeah.
to Harrisburg the last time And Lisa Leonard, she was a terrific find.
Hmm.
She had worked for PTR when they dabbled in a news format very briefly at some point. And she was a great go-getter, a terrific voice, and she melded in very well with the talent we had. She worked, we jointly owned not only K-Lite but WABY.
Yes.
And so Bill Edwardson was there in the morning. I worked with Bill again.
Yeah.
And then David Allen was in the afternoon.
Yep.
And in between there was Bob Gordon.
Oh, wow.
What a great guy.
Yeah.
He did weather for many years.
I remember him as the wasn't he the
the Atlantic
weatherman?
Yes.
Yes.
Why do we think of this?
I
Why
don't know, but he would wear the Atlantic, the gas station
uniform,
outfit,
yes.
the uniform. Yeah,
Exactly. And he did weather on Channel 10 for many years, and then he worked at WABY for
I'll
a
be
long
darned.
time, doing middays.
Sure.
And he was a great host. I learned a lot from him. Yeah.
He did a lot of commercial voiceover work over the years too,
did.
into his later years. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I remember I think he actually called me up once and said, "I can't do this particular commercial. Next week I'm not in town. Can you step in and do this for me?" And I thought, well, it's a nice door that he's going to open for me. And he came back healthy, and there was no problem. I never heard from him again. But I enjoyed doing the commercial. I forget what it was for, but it was a kick talking to him. Yeah.
No, he was a veteran.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
It was nice to get to know him for a while there. So K-Lite ended in 96.
Now, is that probably your longest tenure, you think, 88 to 96?
It was in broadcasting, yes.
Yeah.
It was in broadcasting. It was 8 years.
Yeah.
We were solo in news after 94. I think Lisa left, and they chose not to hire anybody to replace her. So
Yeah.
we were doing news solo. It was kind of, I felt like I was making a difference, but I didn't have a lot of, I couldn't go out and really do a lot.
Yeah.
And cover a lot of ground.
There you
so
go.
It was a little
Yeah.
disappointing, but we were still on in the morning working with Rick, and that meant a lot.
Certainly different from the days when we had, usually the radio news departments had at least 4 or 5 people. And of course you add stringers to that from, other outside markets, and quite a nice crew. But again, as the '90s progressed, and all of a sudden the rules changed about studio or station ownership, a lot of that started sliding off the.
Well, that's what
charts.
happened in '96. The owner didn't need a quote journalist on staff. He used that term almost derisively, and he didn't want to pay for Associated Press. The subscription he thought was just too expensive and wasn't worth his while.
Now, going way back, your Syracuse degree, was it broadcast journalism?
It was radio TV. Yes.
Radio TV. Okay,
Radio
cool.
TV, yeah. It wasn't from Newhouse. Just to take you back. Radio TV wasn't incorporated into Newhouse until the following year. So I was under speech and dramatic art.
Okay.
They didn't take radio TV as seriously as they should have until then.
Yeah.
But I did graduate Syracuse, and let's go Orange. Not doing well this year on the hoop, in the basketball court. But anyway, my broadcast career wasn't done after K-Lite.
Okay.
I did move on to non-broadcast jobs after that. But I did find, Chuck Custer knew me. I knocked at his door, and we arranged it so I would be a part-time.
Cool.
So for 13 years, I worked like an average of once every 3 or 4 weeks on a weekend.
Nice.
And I got to work with Joe Gallagher. And it was a joy working with him. I mean, he was the straight man, and I was the aggressor, verbally, and it worked out very well.
Well, he has had a knack for. I mean, I was on his Saturday morning show for a good 20 years.
And I would 10, bump into you then.
Yep. And for only for 10 or 15 minutes tops on a Saturday morning, I would stop by, and he always found a way to make you the star, and he would play the guy that no, that's not true, or whatever. But you're right. He could play the straight man very well and let you have the spotlight. And still hit punchlines, and still have fun.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, especially he wouldn't have guests early in the morning because it was just too early. Nobody was up. Whether they come in live or on the phone.
Yeah.
But so we would talk after the 6 a.m. news. Probably till 6:15, 6:20 or something.
Exactly. When you're supposed to be back in the newsroom gathering more news.
Exactly.
And he's got you stuck live on the air. Yeah.
Then after for example, I might get through with him at 6:17, and then my God, I got another newscast to do at 6:30.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, those were the days. We had a lot of fun. And Joe certainly, I was a fan before I met him, and even more of a fan as we worked together over the years. Yeah, trying to get him to come to our lunches anymore is a little tough, especially since he became a grandfather for the first time. But occasionally he'll show up and add to the craziness.
Yes. I see his emails on the Louis
the invite,
Louis lunch circuit, and
he's one of a kind, and comes up in a lot of conversations I have here in the Radio Split Ranch.
Well, he's got a lot. He's used a lot of tread.
Yes,
and I say that in a positive sense.
Oh, absolutely.
He's had a long career, and I'm glad he's getting recognition for it.
Yes,
whether it's here or in other places.
Absolutely, I agree. So that's cool. What were you? And I did the same thing that you did. I left radio, full time in '86, and within a year or two, I was back, part time, which I did for another 30 plus years. So what were you doing on the outside of radio to help put food on the table?
Well, I after broadcast, I obviously, as we had discussed, there was fewer opportunities in broadcast news, and I had wanted to get into media relations or public relations, whether it was of state or with another organization. There was an organization, a small business organization in Schoharie, based in Schoharie, statewide, called Support Services Alliance.
Okay.
They opened the door for me in March of '89, was it? No, it wasn't '89. It was later than that. It was after K-Lite. It was March of '97, and I worked at 13. Matter of fact, for 6 months. I missed. There's one thing I did miss here. Before I worked at SSA, I worked for Associated Press
Oh, there you go.
for 6 months as a
Cool.
fill-in.
Yeah.
And, they knew me a lot. I had contributed a lot, and it was great to work there.
Okay.
Because the Associated Press, they are the backbone of journalism.
Yeah. So you were basically writing
I was
the
writing
news,
and
yeah.
and helping out, and yes, I wrote stories, collected stories, put them on the wire.
Sure.
And it was a great group of people there.
Nice.
And also at that, for about the same time, I was working at Channel 13
Okay.
on a part-time basis, less than 30 hours.
Was that with Paul?
Paul Conti?
Conti, sure.
Paul Conti.
Sure. Paul had
Chris
been
Bruner?
Paul had been a news director at GNA before he went to 13. Yeah.
That's right. And I hired Paul at TRY.
I'll be darned.
But they eliminated news at night, and we had to let him go, which was I felt terrible about that. So I worked with Paul, worked with Chris Bruner, the former Peter J.
Sure.
WPTR,
Yeah.
and Chris Capostasi, Ed Daig, John Gray, Jim Cambrick,
Wow.
Roger Weiland. Bob McNamara.
Yeah. Just some great names over the years. We all grew up watching them. Yeah.
And so, but 13 was a part-time gig. Associated Press had ended, so I needed something full-time. So that's when I went to SSA in Scary.
Cool.
And did okay there. I worked there for 8 years.
Okay.
And then I got into United University Professions, UUP, as they refer to themselves often for short, and they are the union representing State University of New York faculty, and they also represent faculty at 3 State University hospitals in Brooklyn, Stony Brook, and Syracuse. You always had to mention that, so that's still ingrained in my brain. And I worked there for 12 years until I retired.
Wow, very good.
Denise Duncan Lacey knew me from Channel 10. She got me in there.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed working with the people and the faculty members.
Yeah.
At SUNY, I met some great people, and I treasure working with them always.
I don't know if it's different in other professions or not, but certainly in radio and TV broadcasting in general, it wasn't always what you knew; it was who you knew. They would open, doors would open because you worked with somebody or you came across them or you saw them at news conferences all the time. And eventually, the relationship would get to the point where they'd say, man, I hope I get to work with this person. Maybe I can hire this person or at least get them a gig somewhere where, we'd, have some more fun together.
There was a lot of that. It wasn't all that.
Yeah.
But if you knew the person and had your foot in the door and they knew about you, it was to your advantage.
Sure. So, did you miss the business by the time you got out of it? Did you miss the news gathering, the deadlines and the?
Well, the fact that I was at WGY until 2009.
Oh, there you go.
And I worked election nights too.
Okay. Yeah.
That really satisfied any kind of longing for it.
Sure. Yeah.
But I didn't miss the early morning hours.
Yeah.
I never liked that.
Oh boy.
I didn't miss the lack of proper remuneration.
That's a way a newsman would put it. That's an awfully nice way of saying they didn't pay crap.
Or the lack of, we're going to have to discipline you. And also, there was no pension.
Yeah.
No benefit. I'm in a decent, what's the word I'm looking for? A decent place now in terms of retirement income, because I worked for non-media organizations. Working in media relations, but not working for broadcasters.
Sure.
Who gave me pensions and 401ks.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, I actually wrote a thank you note when I retired from full-time work, a thank you note to my boss from 1990 to 2002, because during that time, my 401k got to a point where I was sharing and profit sharing and all that stuff, got to a point where I was able to retire at 65, which when I was in broadcasting, never never thought that far ahead, that there's, that I wouldn't be just fine. I'll find a way to make the money. If it weren't for my bosses at a company called Newkirk Products that I worked at for 12 years, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now. I'd be, doing the news somewhere,
right?
or part-time job shift.
I would still be working.
Exactly.
I was able to retire at 68.
Nice.
And I wanted to build up my Social Security income,
Sure.
and build up, the amount I had in my pensions. And
Cool.
It's nice to be comfortable and
Yes.
not have to be waiting on the next paycheck.
That's true. That's true.
I'm not wealthy, but we're comfortable and we're having a nice retirement.
And that's what I told my financial planner who saw, I've had him for like the last going on 25, 30 years. And when it came time to retire, he said, "So, what do you want to do in retirement?" I said, I want to be able to live as long as possible on just what we were making, just what I was bringing home, before I finished working full time in the different jobs that I had over the years after broadcasting, and he was able to make sure that happened. So,
but, Warren, despite having settled into a decent financial state, I don't know about you, I do listen to radio. As I mentioned earlier, I try to listen to news on the hour when I can find it. Mm-hmm. And I do watch the TV news,
Sure.
the local TV broadcast telecasts, just about every night.
Yeah.
I often will compare them and analyze what they covered and how they put their show together, which is what a producer did.
Mm-hmm. My love of news actually didn't start with radio, but TV. When after the Kennedy assassination, and I watched TV for like 4 days, I'm looking at Walter Cronkite and I'm saying I want to do what he does. That was where my sights were set when I went off to college, majored in broadcast journalism. I said that's what I want to do. What turned me away from it eventually and out of news and back into disc jockey work, which is where I started at 16, was to be very honest with you, I'm terrible with foreign languages. Mm-hmm. And just saying some of the names of not just the newsmakers that you get used to saying their name all the time, but a foreign soccer star, or so it just didn't come naturally to me
say
to
Pele?
do that. Terrible time with Pele.
Yeah.
For years I called him Peel. But the bottom line was, I said, you know what? It doesn't hold I don't know what I'm looking for here, but it wasn't me anymore. I said, I think I want to go back to not telling people the news and bringing them down, but I want to go back to being the disc jockey and bringing them up. I want to be able to put a smile on people's faces. So in 70, it was basically 75, I left radio news and went back into full-time jock work, and I was happy from then on. Yeah,
definitely. You had a varied career, and there's among the people I didn't mention, I should have Bob Kovacic.
Oh, there you go.
Working at Channel 10 for years, and then I worked with him at 13 briefly later in the mid 90s.
Yeah, no, another great mainstay here in the Northeast. Somebody was saying when they heard that Neil Lostano was leaving the other day, they said, "Will Bob come back?" And I had the feeling Bob's very happy in retirement. So
I think it was difficult for Bob to retire. I didn't ask him about that, but he was the area's first meteorologist.
True.
I mean, we had. That's not to diss anybody else who did the weather before.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the privilege of working with. I was at Channel 10, another name, Mary Caroline Power.
Oh, sure, yeah.
She did great at Channel 6 and great at Channel 10 doing the new news with the late Ralph Ardigan. What wonderful people.
Absolutely. Ralph used to be a member of our Louis Lunch, and I got a chance to meet Ralph and have lunch with him quite a few times before he passed, and again, very enjoyable people. And it was just, I was just thrilled when I got involved in the group that we, that gets together, because some of these people were responsible for my career. They didn't know it, but I would watch them on TV and listen to them on the radio and emulate them and say, I think I can do this.
Well, also, you admired the people. There were a few other people who were in other stations who I never got to work with, but how I admired deeply.
Sure.
Dave DeMopier.
Oh, yes.
He did
WROW.
a great job at WROW.
Yeah.
And I did work with him at Channel 10, Aaron Shepard as well.
Oh, there you
Another
go. I remember that
ROW,
name. Sure. Yeah.
WROW. And we worked together at Channel 10 for a little while, and he joined me at K-Light. And, of course, Bob Cudmore.
Oh, yeah. Well, Bob
I hired
one of
Bob
our
as a
favorites.
fill-in for me at K-Light. He did a great job.
Yeah.
And what a great guy.
Absolutely. Well, luckily we've had some of those folks sitting here where you are, and I'm still trying to get some others here. I'm going to mention some names we've already mentioned, and if you come across them and talk with them, see if we can do what you can do to convince them to come in here. Okay. Joe Condon's top of my list.
He should be.
And Joe just right now just not in a position where he wants to sit and talk about this, but we got to get him on record because he's the grand old man, if you'll pardon the expression, of broadcasters in this area. He's been doing it since, like you say, since he was a high schooler.
Yes, in the 60s.
In the 60s. And so we've got to get him sitting here. I've already talked about Ralph Iannotti, who said he'll do it. We just have to find the right time to do it. David Allen's another one.
Yes.
David, he's being very honest. He says, you know what? I have forgotten more than I ever knew about the people I worked with. And then he said, I'd just be afraid I'd leave somebody out, and I don't want to do that. And so, but, again, if you come across some of these folks, because I know you know them, just say, hey, this is fun. He's you have to look at him for an hour, but he's not, it's not terrible. And I just want to, it's just a conversation like we've had. And then that's the fun part of this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, you realize sitting here and discussing this with you, how many people you worked with, how many experiences you had. Now life, it's having a family, you have a different perspective.
Yes.
You cannot devote the time and attention and the dedication. You talked about working at WGNA, no vacation for a year, working 18-hour days. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with a family. Mm-hmm. You just can't. No. And you can't have a career and a family, a career like that. Mm-hmm. So your focuses change. Your focus changes, and
they do.
And that's where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, it's been a blast catching up with you and talking to you. So, and I always learn something about, even though I've known somebody for 50 years, I'm always learning something new about them and some of your travels and travails, and thrilled to see you as healthy as you are.
Knock on wood.
Yes. And we seem to have come out pretty much the other side of this COVID thing, and most of us are in pretty good shape and hope to stay that way. But I wish you the best in the rest of your hopefully long retirement.
Well, thank you, Warren. It's been thank you for letting me visit the Split Ranch and share some moments with you.
Well, I've enjoyed it. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Sounds good.
Radio Split Ranch.
Well, remember Don said at least a couple of times he was sorry if he was leaving out the names of some of the professionals he worked with over the years. And wouldn't you know, the second we finished our interview and I turned off the mic, he said, John Gabriel, I forgot to mention working with him. There you go, Gabe. In our continuing quest to mention as many call letters as possible on this podcast, we're going to add Don's stops in his stellar career to our running count. Don says he worked for 9 different radio and TV stations over the years, bringing our total from 19 guests so far to 197. I thought for our closing classic Chris Warren air check this month, we'd go back to the station that Don and I both grew up wanting to work for, the great 98 WTRY in Troy, New York. It took me a tad longer to fulfill my dream, but I arrived in the late summer of 1988 for a part-time Saturday morning gig that lasted about 4 years. Now, I'd been off the radio for about 18 months at this point, so please cut me some slack here in this early air check from August 27th. I didn't even have a jock signature jingle yet when I started there, so listen for the generic blast from the past that we used for a while. My newsman was the late, great Lou Tinney, whom Don worked with in the early 1970s there. And about 10 minutes in here, listen for the crackling scratchiness of a vinyl 45 oldie by Chad and Jeremy, a sound missing from today's digital copies. Hope you'll visit us again next month. Until then, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
The Station. Good morning. 4 minutes after 6 o'clock, 56 degrees as we look to a partly to mostly sunny, warm 84 today.
Something tells me I'm in for something good.
98 WTRY, the oldie station, 6:30 after 6 o'clock. My name is Chris Warren, and we're going to do this until 10 o'clock this morning, or until we get it right, which means I'll be here for a lot of Saturday mornings, I want to tell you. Here's Ray Charles. 98 WTRY, going back to 1960 with Ray Charles. Yeah, Georgia on my mind. 10 minutes after 6 o'clock, I got one thing on my mind this morning, some great oldies. My name is Chris Warren. We're happy to have you here. Turtles coming up in just a few seconds. Also got Elton John later this hour, the Beatles and Elvis. I mean, what other duo could you want? And Peter and Gordon and who knows who between now and 7 o'clock this morning. We're here till 10. Glad to have you along. And don't forget this Monday on the 98 WTRY Hall of Fame, Captain Bob O'Neill will be counting down the top 10 hits from August 29th, 1969. And graduates from the year of 69, gee, just missed it, will have a chance to win a couple of Red Baron microwave pizzas. That's the Hall of Fame, Monday through Friday on the lunch hour on 98 WTRY, the oldie station.
It's true or not, gee, I think I swear.
98 WTRY, where memories are made 24 hours a day. 1958 on 98 WTRY. That's Bobby Day, of course. Rockin' Robin. Thank you. Thank you. That's all right. It wasn't anything. I just read it off the label there. 17 minutes after 6 o'clock. A partly to mostly sunny and warm day today coming up. High 84. According to Tony Visano, we'll get a clear to partly cloudy night tonight. Mild low 60 right now. We've got some sun coming up and 56 degrees at 98 WTRY. Hey! 98 WTRY, the oldie station with some music from Elton John. Benny and the Jets from 74. It's 22 after 6 o'clock, 56 degrees, some sunshine coming up, and the forecast as well. And then we're going to have another WTRY Gold Rush with at least 4 great oldies in a row, so don't go away.
Answering a disturbance at 14% savings at the kids' store. It'll make going back to school a whole lot better.
Well, a little better.
The 98 Weather Watch 98 forecast, according to WTRY's meteorologist Tony Visano, who's up early this morning, says partly to mostly sunny and warm today, high around 84. Clear to partly cloudy and mild overnight, low around 60. Then sunny tomorrow morning with increasing afternoon clouds and a chance of a shower or a thunderstorm by late in the afternoon. It'll be humid tomorrow with a high around 84, a little more seasonal these days. For Monday, showers and scattered thunderstorms, they say, and a high around 80 right now. It is 80, make that 56. I'm pushing it a little bit here. 56 degrees at Weather Watch 98 WTRY.
WTRY's Gold Rush means more oldies back to back. The oldie station, WTRY.
98 WTRY. 21 years ago today, Brian Epstein, manager of the Beatles, was found dead in his London flat from an apparently accidental overdose of sleeping pills. In memoriam, the Beatles. Nobody plays more oldies than 98 WTRY. 98 WTRY, 1964, when it was surf, sand, cars, skateboards, whatever else they could get into California, I guess. And Ronnie the Daytona's little GTO. It's 19 before 7 o'clock. We got an extra one in there for you. Had 5 in that Gold Rush. Not too bad. I deliver, all right? 19 shy of 7. Did I say that already? Probably. 56 and some sunshine coming up. And a day of about 84, it looks like, with mostly sunny skies and warm temperatures. Going to be nice. I'm heading out to Cape Cod. All right, go ahead and drool. Going out to Cape Cod for a week, and we'll be leaving at about 10 seconds past 10 o'clock this morning. 98 WTRY, the radio station for oldies, news, and weather. Set your radio for 98 WTRY. The oldie station, 98 WTRY. Some music from B.J. Thomas, 1970. And just can't help believing it's already 8.5 minutes before 7 o'clock. Already the whole first hour of the Chris Warren Show is history. Well, sort of. 56 and some sunshine as the sun is coming up at this hour. And we have the full Tony Fasano forecast coming up in just a few moments, followed by 64 music from Peter and Gordon. Want to remind you, first of all, that this weekend we bring you Super Gold as we do each and every weekend, America's coast-to-coast oldies request show with host Mike Harvey. And tonight on Super Gold, Mike presents the top 40 hits of 1967, the Summer of Love. Going to be fun. Then Super Gold Sunday tomorrow night, a spotlight on the greatest hits of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. Some good stuff there, too. That Super Gold happens every weekend, Saturday and Sunday evenings, beginning at 7 on the oldie station, 98 WTRY.
This morning, classes begin September 6th.
The Weather Watch 98 forecast at about 6 minutes before 7 o'clock, according to WTRY's meteorologist Tony Fasano. Currently, it's 56 degrees at Weather Watch 98 WTRY.
The oldie station. I don't want to see you again.
98 WTRY, only one thing ever was wrong with that song. It was only 1 minute and 57 seconds. I love that thing. 3 minutes before 7 o'clock with the music you and I grew up with on 98 WTRY. My name is Chris Warren, and we're going to head into Lieutenant News in just a few moments with Sam Cooke, but we do have a moment or two to tell you about today's birthdays so that you can send birthday cards to these people. Make sure you send belated birthday greetings because they're all, born on this date. Tuesday Weld, 45. Remember Tuesday Weld? Boy, you are old. She was born Susan W. Weld, I guess, in New York City 45 years ago this day. Martha Ray is 72 today, Martha Ray. Fantastic comedian. Born Margaret Reed in Butte, Montana. Tarzan is 76 today, and I'm talking about the original appearance of the ape man in the All Story magazine. And Mother Teresa is 78 today. Just a few people you might want to send cards to.
WTRY for the Capital District.
From the past, WTRY, the oldie station. It's the little old lady.
98 WTRY, the oldie station from 1960. Blue Angel, Roy Orbison, Sha-la-la, Doobie-wah, Bum Bum Bum. Yup. I love it. I mean, where else but in America? 12 and a half after 7 o'clock. My name is Chris Warren. We've got 56 degrees, sunshine, and a high of 84 expected today. Also got music this hour from Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders, the Beatles. Let's see, Chad and Jeremy will be here, Richie Valens, and many more. And we've got at least 3 in a row with another WTRY Gold Rush coming up in just a moment. First of all, though, you remember Cousin Brucey. Everybody remembers Cousin Brucey. If you didn't catch him last week, you caught him when you were growing up on the radio. Well, this weekend, it's Cousin Brucey Cruisin' America, and on Cruisin' America, you'll hear interviews with Gladys Knight, Richie Havens, and the genius of Ray Charles in concert. That's Cruisin' America with Cousin Brucey tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, right here on the oldie station, 98 WTRY. Yesterday's greatest songs are on the oldie station, 98 WTRY.
We got a groovy kind of love.
98 WTRY, the oldie station from the spring of 66, a number 2 song for Mindbenders without Wayne Fontana. He left just before that song came out. I remember calling this very radio station, WTRY back then, requesting that song for Nancy, who would have absolutely nothing to do with me, but I kept dedicating that song to her anyway. 8th grade, what do you want to do? 22 minutes after 7 o'clock with Chris. Glad to have you along. We're here till 10 o'clock this morning, and we have the Weather Watch 98 forecast coming up in just a few moments. It's down to 54 degrees. This time of year, that kind of happens where things kind of get a little convoluted this hour of the morning. So we went down a couple of degrees, but the forecast calls for a nice high of 84 today, so stick around.
Could you repeat it?
All of it?
Sunday and Monday only.
Teacher, I forgot my pencil. 25 after 7, here's the Weather Watch 98 forecast according to WTRY meteorologist Tony Fasano. Storm by late in the afternoon. Hey, you can have a completely perfect weekend. Humid with a high of 84 tomorrow. Monday calls for a high of 80 with maybe a shower, scattered thunder shower. Right now, it's 54 at Weather Watch 98 WTRY. 98 WTRY, the Coasters, going back to 1959. New Tinny has news coming up in just a couple of minutes. Here's a song that Paul McCartney calls his favorite.
This is Lou Tinny for Newswatch 98, a service of WTRY for the Capital District.
Blast from the past, WTRY, the oldie station.
Good morning. My name is Chris Warren. We're on 98 WTRY. Glad to have you along. Later on this hour, we got the horoscopes for you. Don't go away. Let you know if you should go outside today, even. 98 WTRY, the main ingredient from 72, and everybody plays the fool. We all take turns. 20 minutes before 8 o'clock with 54 degrees and sunshine, and Curtis Lee with those pretty little angel eyes.
Pretty little angel eyes.
98 WTRY, where you'll hear the latest traffic reports with your eye on the highway. And Wayne Van Warmer with Traffic Watch 98 mornings and afternoons exclusively for the Capital District from 98 WTRY. Here's Chad and Jeremy. 1964 from 98 WTRY with all your favorite oldies. Let's go back to 1958. Richie Valens. Oh, yeah. There is a great commercial on TV using that song right now. The little old lady there that takes the car for a spin, that's good stuff. 12 and a half before 8 o'clock, 54 degrees. We're going toward 84 today, 30 degrees to go. I'm counting them down on 98 WTRY. Was it really 20 years ago this time of year for Dion?
Abraham and Martin and John.
1968 on 98 WTRY. Got up to number 4 in October of that year for Dion, his last big hit. 10 before 8 o'clock, 54 degrees, and the full Tony Mazzano forecast coming up in just a few moments. Also going back to 1964 with Leslie Gore. But first, your horoscopes for this Saturday morning, the 27th of August. Aries, time to tune up your body. Treat yourself to luxuries. Get in better shape. Increase both your exercise and relaxation. Taurus, romantic breakthroughs are staring you right in the face. Don't underestimate the obvious. Gemini, you are under no obligation to make people feel comfortable by doing the same old, safe, boring thing. Don't repeat yourself. Cancer, today's events could lead you to close to a fountain of youth. Be innocent and willing to suspend your biases. Leo, it's a good time to buy as long as you're not impulsive or compulsive. And Virgo, when your golden opportunity comes into view for a brief moment, pounce. Don't let it get away. We'll have the rest of your horoscopes for this day right after we listen to the Disney Channel here.
The Disney Channel, America's family network.
Ask Sherwin-Williams. Sale ends September 17th.
The Weather Watch 98 forecast, according to WTRY's meteorologist Tony Mazzano. Currently 54 degrees at Weather Watch 98 WTRY, and the rest of your horoscopes this morning. It's Libra. It's better to stop cold turkey than to drag out the ending. Exert your willpower. Scorpio, you don't need another rival at this point. Play down competition. Avoid antagonism. Sagittarius, it's an impulsive day. Prime time to elope, escape, or make a bold bid for something that has been forever out of reach. Capricorn, the wild things are getting restless. Better tame them now while you still have the upper hand. Aquarius, sins of omission are the worst kind. Don't leave out a single fact. Don't skip a single step. And Pisces, love is coming at you from the blind side. Expect the unexpected. Those are your horoscopes for this Saturday, August 27th, 5 minutes before 8 o'clock.
The oldie station, TRY. Baby, I know that. Baby, I know that.
98 WTRY, Leslie Gore, and Maybe I Know. 2.5 before Lou Tinney News at 8 o'clock this morning. And hey, they are really getting ready for a big weekend in Deming, New Mexico. Today is the Great American Duck Races, the richest duck races on Earth. That's what it says here. They're going to crown the Duck Queen today and tomorrow in Deming, New Mexico. And all I can say to that is don't send me the bill, okay? Hey, listen. I know you don't believe this, but I didn't write that line. I'm sorry. Here's Tommy Rowe. Sweet.
A service of WTRY for the Capital District.
Blast from the past. WTRY, the oldie station.
That's him, the original blast from the past. My name is Chris Warren. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock with the Four Tops. 98 WTRY from 1956, the first #1 song for Elvis, and of course, Heartbreak Hotel. 12 minutes after 8 o'clock, Four Tops from 65 just before that. How are you on this Saturday morning? I'm doing just fine, having a good time playing the music that you and I both grew up with, and we've got a lot more of it coming up this hour. Still to come, Spencer Davis Group, Neil Sedaka. We'll hear from Sonny and Cher, Simon and Garfunkel, Loggins and Messina. coming up later on this hour. And in just a few moments, we've got another WTRY Gold Rush. At least 3 great oldies in a row coming up next. Don't go away. First, want to remind you, another Solid Gold Hump Day is coming up on 98 WTRY. That happens this Wednesday. It happens every Wednesday. All you have to do is get ready to call in and request your favorite oldie from the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, and we'll play them back between 10 and 3 this Wednesday. In the Hump Day Spotlight, we'll have the great hits of Dion. It's Solid Gold Hump Day this and every Wednesday, 10 to 3 on the oldie station, 98 WTRY. We've got you coming and going with Capital District's best oldies. When you want to hear music instead of talk, switch to the oldie station, 98 WTRY. 15 minutes after 8 o'clock, Spencer Davis Group, 1967, on a 56-degree, sunshiny Saturday morning. 98 WTRY, Beatles 65, Norwegian Wood at 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. How are you this Saturday morning? My name is Chris Warren, and we're going to do this thing until 10 o'clock or until we get it right, as I say more than once, which is one of the reasons why I keep getting it wrong. 56 degrees now, heading toward a high of 84. The full Tony Forzano forecast is coming up in just a moment. I want to remind you, first of all, that Captain Bob O'Neill is back on Monday, and of course at noontime he'll have the top 10 hits from August 29th, 1969. It's called the WTRY Hall of Fame, and graduates from the year of 69 have a chance to win a couple of Red Baron microwave pizzas. It's the Hall of Fame, Monday through Friday on the lunch hour from 98 WTRY, the oldie station.
Summertime. You could win tickets to Super Bowl 23. Details and savings at Sherwin-Williams.
When you do it yourself, don't do it on yourself. Ask Sherwin-Williams.
Sale ends September 17th.
The Weather Watch 98 forecast, September 17th. All right, looked at my watch. It said the 27th. I said, oh, that's good. But it's September. So you get a lot of time on that Sherwin-Williams sale. Don't listen to the disc jockey. Don't pay no attention to that man behind the microphone. Weather Watch 98 forecast, according to WTRY's meteorologist Tony Bazzano at Weather Watch 98 WTRY.
Sunday before.
98 WTRY. 28 minutes after 8 o'clock. Saturday morning with Chris Warren on your radio till 10 this morning. Lou Tinney is going to get us up to date in just a couple with Newswatch 98. Here's Barbara Lewis from 1965.
Baby.
For Newswatch 98, a service of WTRY for the Capital District.
Blast from the past. WTRY, the oldie station.
23 minutes shy of 9 o'clock. I'm Chris Warren with those blasts from the past. Until 10 o'clock this morning, we're hanging from your earlobe. Got Neil Sedaka from 1975. Some Bad Blood. 98 WTRY, Joey D and the Starlighters and the Peppermint Twist from 1962. Got a trio of duos coming up next. Don't go away. I want to remind you first that this weekend we bring you Super Gold, America's coast-to-coast oldies request show with host Mike Harvey. Tonight on Super Gold, Mike presents the top 40 hits of the Summer of Love, 1967. Then on Super Gold Sunday, a spotlight on the greatest hits of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. That's all on Super Gold. Happens every Saturday and Sunday night beginning at 7 on the oldie station 98 WTRY. The oldie station, 98 WTRY, playing solid gold back to back. Partly to mostly sunny, warm today, high around 84 right now. Sunshine, 56 degrees with Chris Warren and Simon and Garfunkel.
Where you go to rock and roll?
WTRY.
Where you go?
Where else?
To rock and roll.
Right here, 98.
Where you go to rock and roll?
Kenny Loggins, Jimmy Messina. 1972, Your Mama Don't Dance and Your Daddy Don't Rock and Roll. They rock and rolled that to the top 10. Their only top 10 single back in 72. 7 minutes now before 9 o'clock with Chris Warren. Another hour or so together. We got Lou Tinney with news coming up at 9 o'clock this morning. And a lot more to come. Next hour, got some great music. All I got to do is find it here. Just turn the sheet over. We got some music from the Beach Boys. Start out the hour next hour. Left Bank, Three Dog Night, Tremolos, and who knows who else could come in the door. We had Fred Flintstone here a few minutes ago.
Ask Sherwin-Williams.
4 before 9 o'clock, the Weather Watch 98 forecast, according to WTRY's meteorologist Tony Bazzano, who's up early this morning. High 84 if you're looking ahead to Monday, and we don't want to do that quite yet, but we will with the weather anyway. Showers and scattered thunder showers and a high around 80. Currently 56 degrees and sunshine at Weather Watch 98 WTRY. Got to check this date in history. I never go into a newscast without finding out what happened before on this date in history. In 1928, the Kellogg-Briand Pact was signed in Paris, outlawing war and providing for the peaceful settlement of disputes. Well, that worked real good. because in 1945 on this date, American troops began landing in Japan at the end of World War II. So you can see how much they paid attention to that.
WTRY for the Capital District.
Blast from the past. WTRY, the oldies station.
Always fun to start out a Chris Warren hour with the Beach Boys. 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Wouldn't it be nice? 98 WTRY. Oh, yeah. Dion and the Belmonts and their biggest hit together from back in late 1959, Where or When for the Bronx guys. 11 minutes after 9 o'clock with Chris Warren. Happy to have you here on Saturday morning. And this weekend we present Cruisin' America with Cousin Brucey. It happens tomorrow. It happens every Sunday. On Cruisin' America, you'll hear interviews with Gladys Knight, Richie Havens, and the genius of Ray Charles in concert. Cruisin' America with Cousin Brucey tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock right here on the oldie station, 98 WTRY. Still to come this hour, some music from the Temptin' Temptations, of course, Three Dog Night, Tremolos, Stevie Wonder, Beatles, and more.
Uh-oh, look over there.
98 WTRY, the home of the Capital District's oldie station. 17 after 9 o'clock. 64 degrees with a Temptation. 98 WTRY, the oldie station. Chuck Berry. Would you believe that man didn't have a number one song until 1972? He started his career in 1955. Hard to believe. That was a top 10 oldie right there. No particular place to go this morning, so we were glad to have you right here at 98 WTRY. 22 after 9 o'clock, 64, and sunshine, and the full forecast is right around the corner.
Attention, parents. New.
At McDonald's.
No.
At McDonald's.
Nice.
Anytime.
The Fiesta
Break it.
Colada.
Shake it.
Fiesta Colada.
Shake.
At participating
Stop by McDonald's.
Naturally and artificially flavored. Available for a limited time only.
You would watch 98. I do that every time I come out of that commercial. I do the same thing. The Weather Watch 98 forecast. I get into the beat, can't get out of it. According to WTRY meteorologist Tony Visano, currently 64 at Weather Watch 98 WTRY. 98 WTRY. And Jimmy Darren, no relation to Bobby. They even spelled their names differently, so you wouldn't be confused. Of course, they look so much alike. Here's the left bank.
For Newswatch 98, a 24-hour service of WTRY for the Capital District.
Blast from the past. WTRY, the oldie station.
With Chris Warren and Three Dog Night. 98 WTRY, Buddy Knox and Party Doll. I have a copy of that single at home myself. I do. It's in pretty good shape, if I do say so myself. Better shape than I'm in from all those years. 19 shy of 9 o'clock. That, of course, is Party Doll. Before that, the Three Dog Night from 69. And one. Can't think of anything funny to say about the number one, so we won't do it. We're going to be here for another few minutes. Captain Bob is coming in at 10 o'clock this morning. I'm here at 9 o'clock, yes. He'll be in at 10 o'clock this morning. Read your card, right, yes. And coming up, he's got some fun on Wednesday. He has a good time on Wednesdays because you can call in and program his show. He doesn't have to do it, so he loves it. Get ready to call in, request your favorite oldie on the Solid Gold Hump Day, your oldies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He'll play them between 10 and 3. And in the Hump Day Spotlight, the greatest hits of Dion. So don't miss it. The Solid Gold Hump Day. This is every Wednesday, 10 to 3 on the oldie station, 98 WTRY. The oldie station, 98 WTRY, with the greatest hits of all time. They're right here. Don't go away. Captain Bob's coming up. I can tell by the stacks of wax he's piling in the back of the room that it's going to be a good day. Here's Stevie. 98 WTRY, Stevie Wonder, back when they took the word little off of the front of his name, I believe. And If You Really Love Me, that's going back to 1971. Still got some Beatles and Elvis to come. That's the way to wrap up a show, huh? We're going to have some fun for the next 10 minutes. And then, of course, it gets even better with Captain Bob a little after 10 o'clock this morning. And he's got, on Monday, the top 10 hits from August 29th, 1969. It's called the WTRY Hall of Fame. And graduates from that year of 69, we've got a chance for you to win a couple of Red Baron microwave pizzas. So be listening. The Hall of Fame, Monday through Friday on the lunch on the 98 WTRY, the oldie station. Spit it out, Chris.
Friend card that pays you back.
The Weather Watch 98 forecast, according to WTRY meteorologist Tony Visano. Sunshine at 98 WTRY.
The oldie station, TRY. Twist the time is here.
98 Hey, WTRY. Chris saying have a good week. We'll catch you in a couple. Here's Elvis.